Zecharia Sitchin's theory was introduced to the world in 1976 with his first book, The 12th Planet, and today, 30 years later, it is the essential component to the work of many of today's alternative researchers, teachers, authors, and speakers. Sitchin's work remains the bedrock that many have built their very similar theories on. If Sitchin is wrong, so are they. Zecharia Sitchin's theory is that an ancient, highly advanced, extraterrestrial race came to Earth many thousands of years ago from a planet called Nibiru, which has a 3,600-year orbit around our Sun. He claims that they used genetic engineering techniques to modify the genes of the inhabitants of prehistoric Earth, to create more intelligent workers for their various operations. He claims that this race traveled in flying craft around the Earth in those days, and that they explain many of the ancient mysteries mankind has been confounded by over the years. Sitchin bases his theory on his supposedly unparalleled ability to translate ancient languages. Yet some scholars claim Sitchin has such obvious errors in his translations that they doubt whether he knows any of the ancient languages he says he does, and have repeatedly asked him to produce any evidence that he has had formal training in ancient languages. One of those men is Dr. Michael Heiser. Mr. Heiser earned his Ph.D. in Hebrew Bible and ancient Semitic languages at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Mike holds an M.A. in ancient history, Egypt, Palestine, from the Ivy League University of Pennsylvania, and an M.A. at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in Hebrew Bible and ancient Semitic languages. Coast to Coast AM Art Bell says Mike is uniquely qualified to discuss the relationship between ancient text and ufology. Mike has appeared twice a year since 2000 with Art Bell, George Noory, and Barbara Simpson, answering questions pertaining to the Nephilim of Genesis 6 and his critiques of Zecharia Sitchin's errors. Upon hearing only one of these shows, speaker and author Jim Marrs told Mike that he had wished he had heard Michael Heiser's analysis before endorsing Zecharia Sitchin in his book Alien Agenda. Dr. Heiser thoroughly details the many errors of Zecharia Sitchin on his website, sitchiniswrong.com. I encourage you to review his many papers there, and you will see that it is very unlikely that Sitchin accidentally makes the mistakes he does. Mr. Heiser only covers Sitchin's translation errors on sitchiniswrong.com. This, however, will be an attempt to look at some of Sitchin's archaeological evidences that he produces to support his theory. Anyone familiar with Sitchin's work will recognize this image. Sitchin has this to say about it on page 70 of his book, Stairway to Heaven. An even more startling depiction has been found in the tomb of Hoi, who was viceroy in Nubia and in the Sinai Peninsula during the reign of the renowned pharaoh Tutankhamun. Decorated with scenes of people, places, and objects from the two domains in which he was viceroy, his tomb preserves to this very day a depiction in vivid colors of a rocket ship. Its shaft is contained in an underground silo. Its upper stage, with the command module, is above ground. The shaft is subdivided, like a multi-staged rocket. Inside its lower part, two persons attend to hoses and levers. There is a row of circular dials above them. The silo cutaway shows that it is surrounded by tubular cells for heat exchange or some other energy-related function. Above ground, the hemispherical base of the upper stage is clearly depicted in the color painting as scorched, as though from re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. The command module, large enough to hold 3 or 4 persons, is conical in shape, and there are vertical peepholes all around its bottom. The cabin is surrounded by worshippers in a landscape of date, palm trees, and drafts. The underground chamber is decorated with leopard skins, and this provides a direct link with the certain phases in the pharaoh's journey to immortality. The leopard skin was the distinctive garb symbolically worn by the Shem priest as he performed the opening of the mouth ceremony. It is the distinctive garb symbolically worn by the gods who towed the pharaoh through the secret path of the hidden place of the Duat, a symbolism repeated to stress the affinity between the pharaoh's journey and the rocket ship in the underground silo. If this is real, it is a very compelling argument. However, it is suspicious because it is a hand-drawn image, and there are plenty of photos elsewhere in Sitchin's book. Why not offer one for this too, especially considering the amazing quality of the preservation of the rest of the murals in the tomb of Hoi? It is also suspicious because those murals depicted rather ordinary happenings from a relatively late period in Egyptian history. If Sitchin's drawing is to be found on these walls, it would be artistically and conceptually out of place. While searching in vain for any photo of Sitchin's famous drawing, I came across this photo, courtesy of the Museum of Metropolitan Art. This is what the caption reads: "Detail of a wall painting from the tomb of a high Egyptian official showing an Egyptian scribe recording deliveries of Nubian products shortly after Egypt's conquest of Nubia. Visible are ebony logs, ivory tusks, baskets of ostrich eggs, and gold ingots, ostrich feathers, leopard skins, resins, tamarind nuts, aromatic herbs, even a green monkey. Reign of King Tutmos III, about 1479 to 1425 BCE. There are odd similarities in the style and content to Sitchin's drawing and this mural from a nearby tomb. Notice the cone at the top. Sitchin's command module. Is this just a monkey on top of a triangle table? Remember Sitchin said the silo cutaway shows that it is surrounded by tubular cells for heat exchange or some other energy-related function? We see these circular golden objects in baskets. Could these be Sitchin's tubular cells? Notice the stack of leopard skins. Remember what Sitchin says about them? He says the underground chamber is decorated with leopard skins, and this provides a direct link with the certain phases in Pharaoh's journey. And while there are no drafts or worshippers in this scene like there are in Sitchin's drawing, there are on other walls in the very same temple, and of the same style too, which is further evidence that this is where Sitchin based his drawing from. And if it is, he has added many self-servicing details, like people pulling levers and hoses, and charring on the command module from re-entry, as well as peepholes. Is Sitchin manipulating common tomb murals that he must know have nothing to do with space travel? Possibly the reason this evidence against Sitchin has gone unnoticed for so long is because Sitchin says the mural is from the tomb of Hoi, when it is actually from the tomb of Rekhmire. This would make his trail almost impossible to follow. After 30 years, no one can seem to find a photo of Sitchin's mural at the tomb of Hoi, despite the fact that photos of that tomb are common and widely available. While someone still might produce a photo of this mural and confirm it to be authentic and from the Temple of Hoi, I find it very unlikely, but it is possible. Let's move on to a few others. This one will also look familiar to readers of Sitchin's books. It is supposedly an ancient artifact depicting a rocket ship. The following is from a Sitchin supporter's website. Sitchin describes the pilot as sitting with legs folded towards his chest and wearing a one-piece ribbed pressure suit, which becomes boots at the feet and gloves at the hands, and points out that since the pilot's head is missing, we cannot know whether the pilot wore a helmet, goggles, or other headgear. The artifact measures 5.7 inches long, 3.8 inches high, and 3.5 inches wide. Continuing, from another Sitchin supporter's website. Sitchin says he spent years tracking down the artifact until he located it at the Archaeology Museum in Istanbul. It was excavated at Toprakal, a city known in ancient times as Tuspa, where the kingdom of Urartu reigned briefly over 2,500 years ago. The museum curators decided this small artifact must be a forgery because it differs from the era's style, and more importantly, it looks like a space capsule. They reasoned that since there were no space capsules in ancient times, it must be a modern fake, a practical joke, made out of plaster of Paris and marble powder. I found this comment suspicious. The museum curators weren't displaying it because they thought it was a forgery. Not just because it looked like a rocket, but because they thought it was made out of plaster of Paris and marble powder. That's interesting because who would know better than if an object was made out of plaster of Paris than the one in possession of it, especially if that person was a museum curator who would be trained to make that distinction. I did see one website that had addressed the issue of it being plaster, but they dismissed the idea, saying that if it were made out of plaster, the place where the head had come off would be white instead of marble brown. I would suggest that if it is the product of a hoaxer, not having to sculpt a head would make it much less difficult to have it appear authentic, because they would not have to contrive a space helmet and risk it looking out of place. After all, Sitchin made sure he put the idea that the head must have included a helmet and even goggles, so there was no need. Plus, they would only have to break the plaster head off before they applied the paint or marble dust. The object was apparently not displayed by the museum before or since Sitchin's visit, so no peer reviewing or testing of the artifact has ever been done to my knowledge. I cannot even confirm that it is actually in the museum at Istanbul, although recently one pro-Sitchin website says that it is now on display in Istanbul, but I cannot find any record of that or any mention of it at all outside of pro-Sitchin websites. There are conflicting stories on how the museum came into possession of the artifact. They are that it was confiscated from a departing visitor who had acquired it and was going to carry it to a foreign country. It is illegal to export pieces in Turkey. And 2, the object in question was brought to the Istanbul Archaeological Museum in 1973 by an antique dealer, which stated he wanted to sell when he realized that it was a fake. One more interesting fact. In an interview, Sitchin said it was Alpe Passinli, who was the curator of the museum, that showed him the artifact. The foreign press recently had this to say about Mr. Passinli while discussing a recent scandal with the finding of an underground palace in Istanbul. Passinli is no longer speaking to reporters after the Turkish press alleged that he was connected with artifact smuggling and the palace discovery was a scam involving the hotel, which wanted to cash in on the find by converting part of the uncovered palace remains into a tourist bazaar. None of these allegations is proven, but Passinli is under investigation by the Ministry of Culture. Considering what Dr. Michael Heiser has found out about Sitchin's many translation errors that are detailed at sitchiniswrong.com, it is concerning to look at this information because it seems like Sitchin could not have made these errors by accident. The question I hope you will ask yourself is why? Who or what group could possibly benefit from disseminating this type of information? I will suggest to you a theory, a conspiracy theory, that a particular group of powerful families have all but completed their creation of a new world order infrastructure, and that they know they will have to have a world religion to unite those diverse nations. I say Sitchin's theory is the foundation for that religion. I said that they have baited us with what we have always been seeking, the truth, that they have in fact as of late been providing even sometimes the best source of certain truths, while at the same time mixing in variations of this very same lie. I'm not saying every one of them is in on it, but I feel many of them are. The funding of this type of information by the Rockefeller family alone is worth consideration. The Rockefellers funded Orson Welles' The War of the Worlds broadcast, which introduced the world to the concept of a possible alien threat, or at least the presence of them. They funded Harvard's John Mack and his alien abduction research, which heavily influenced that the aliens want what's best for us idea. And Sitchin himself operates out of Rockefeller Center in New York. There is an alternative explanation for the anomalies of the ancient past, one that does fit in with the ancient text and the archaeological record, and it's even a little stranger than Sitchin or anyone else could dream up. It's one that they actually really don't want you to know about. It's complicated and it will take a good deal of research, but the pieces do finally start to fit when you plug in a few key principles. I will provide links to places where you can start your research on the description section of this movie, and I will also list them in the credits. Thank you for your time.